superstar who dominated basketball in the 1960s and 70s, was found dead today at his home in Los Angeles. Chamberlain was 63. CBS's Sandra Hughes has the story of the man they called the Big Dipper.
Police and paramedics rushed to the Bel Air home of Wilt Chamberlain this afternoon, responding to reports of a cardiac arrest. The 63-year-old basketball great's attorney was the first to release news that Chamberlain had died. Known as the NBA's all-time leading rebounder, he still holds the record for scoring 100 points in a single game. Wilt the Stilt stood 7'1" and was such a force on the court that the NBA changed some of its rules to minimize his dominance of the game. One of 11 children, he was often teased as a youth because of his size, but by high school in Philadelphia, he was using his height and talent as a standout player. He led the University of Kansas Jayhawks into the NCAA Finals. He played 14 mesmerizing professional seasons, winning 1 championship with the LA Lakers. Even though much was made of his rivalry with Boston Celtics player Bill Russell, he was humbled by Russell's talent.
I was fortunate enough to start playing my basketball career who I consider against the best, which is Bill. Competition, I believe, brings the best out of you.
Not so humble in a tell-all book that stunned fans in which he bragged of sleeping with thousands of women. But the ability he'll be remembered for most was playing an outstanding game, one of the best in basketball history. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Coming up next on the CBS Evening News.
In the world of sports, the Jumbotron has the sights and sounds for you. The sports world mourning the passing of one of the NBA's greatest legends.
Baseball's top talk show gets down to the business of balls and strikes finally, Game 1 of the NLCS.
This bull may be headed to Tinseltown for a reunion with his former coach.
Jets lose, Parcells talks, enough said. We'll get to the sound in a minute, but we start with the passing of a legend. Earlier this summer, I ran into Wilt Chamberlain in an LA restaurant. He was sitting at the bar alone, so I went over to say hello. We talked for several minutes about basketball, the Lakers in particular, and before I left, he gave me his phone number and said to call. Because I'm a journalist, I wanted to call the next day. Wilt's a good story, and he had a lot of great things to say. Because I'm a fan, I wanted to respect his privacy. 3 weeks ago, I stumbled across that napkin with Wilt's number, and the fact that I didn't make that call is something I will always regret. Because this afternoon, Wilton Norman Chamberlain, the most prolific player in NBA history, passed away. The Hall of Famer was discovered by a longtime employee at his Bel Air, California home, and when authorities arrived slightly after noon Pacific time, he was pronounced dead. Chamberlain, who spent 14 years in the NBA and is considered by many to be the greatest player in the game's history, leaves a legacy larger than his 7'1" stature.
Everybody always points to Michael in making all these changes or things, but Wilt Chamberlain was the first one that really made changes. He was the first dominant person of basketball.
One year he averaged 50 points a game. Average 50 points a game. It's hard to believe that I saw some of it. I saw him one night break Elgin Baylor's record, which was a 72 for a game in the NBA, and Wilt made 78 that night.
I remember one game we played, it was against Chicago when he had joined us, near the tail end of my career. And it was this particular game, I don't think for 6 minutes, they never got a shot that hit the rim of the basket. And, Wilt just went out, contested every shot, jump shots and everything. I never saw anything like it.
Keep in mind that in his NBA career, Bill Russell has 0 individual all-time records. Michael Jordan has 3 all-time NBA records. Wilt Chamberlain has 56 all-time NBA records. Now tell me who's the greatest player of all time.
Tony Cox has spent the majority of the day outside of Wilt Chamberlain's Bel Air home and joins us now with more on the passing of a legend. Tony?
Kevin, all is quiet right now on this hilltop street above Mulholland Drive, leading to the home where Wilt Chamberlain lived for 30 years and where, as you say, he died on Tuesday morning. A house that is behind us that you can't see now because the police some hours ago moved us down here. But earlier in the day, there was quite a bit of activity out front of that house as the press gathered for a chance to talk to some of Wilt's friends and family members about his life. And after a brief impromptu press conference by the LAPD attended by some of those friends and family members, one person in particular took the time to talk about a man that he had known for 40 years.
In my opinion, he was one of the brightest, most intelligent guys I've ever known. He was more inquisitive than anybody I knew. He was interested in everything. As an example, he was just taking saxophone lessons. He was writing a screenplay about his life.
He is a person that will always be one of our favorite people, not only because he was a great basketball player, but he was a great son, a great brother, a great uncle, and he was just a nice person.
You know, it was strangely quiet as the hearse came to pick up Wilt Chamberlain's body, backed out the driveway and went down the street. People just sort of stood and looked. Nobody said very much. I also had the chance to hear from Wilt's sister during the news conference earlier today, and she said that he had been sick. He had had heart troubles. He had had some dental surgery that she felt led to a 50-pound weight loss in the last month, which is pretty dramatic. And the final thing that she said was that she saw him on Saturday night when he asked her to fix his favorite meal of chicken and dumplings, which she did, but she said that was the worst she had ever seen her brother. Back to you.
Thanks, Tony. We'll have more on the life of the Big Dipper a little later in the show. Wilton Norman Chamberlain was 63 years old.
And with Wilt on their minds and the thoughts to the families, the show goes on, as does the sporting world. We all know they can talk the talk. Remember, Chipper said beating on the Mets down the stretch was like winning the World Series.
Sixers coach Larry Brown tells a great story about Wilt Chamberlain. When Brown coached at UCLA in the early 80s, Wilt dropped by Pauley Pavilion one afternoon to play in the pickup game that Magic Johnson often organized. Johnson made several calls against Chamberlain, including goaltending during the game. And finally, Wilt said, "Okay, no more layups in this gym." After that, according to Brown, Wilt didn't allow one of Johnson's shots to get to the rim. At the time, Chamberlain was in his 40s. It's just another demonstration of what a great basketball player Wilt Chamberlain was, but he was also an amazing human being. And his death today has left the sports world in shock. Let's look back on the life and times of the man they called the Big Dipper. At 7'1", Wilton Norman Chamberlain towered over most men. For that matter, he towered over life itself. His accomplishments on and off the basketball court were both amazing and outlandish, in many ways like the man himself.
He had a very strong opinion about everything. He had a very strong opinion about himself as a player. And I think he always felt maybe he didn't get the credit he was due.
If you don't understand what Wilt Chamberlain accomplished, then crack open the NBA record book. Simply put, he was the most prolific player in NBA history. 32 times he scored more than 60 points. He is the only player to ever average over 50 points for an entire season and the only big man to lead the league in assists. He once gathered 55 rebounds in a single game and is the only man to score 4,000 points in a season. But he will always be remembered for the March night in 1962 when he scored 100 points against the New York Knicks. To put that into perspective, only one team in the entire NBA averaged more than 100 points last season. Wilt Chamberlain didn't just dominate the NBA, he defined it.
Without the NBA, we would have had no chance to showcase any of our talents, and they're giving so many of us, especially men of color, a chance to go out there and do wonderful things in sports and make a great living for ourselves.
In his last years, Chamberlain loved to wear his Letterman's jacket from Overbrook High School in Philadelphia. It's the place where his legend was born, leading the varsity at Overbrook to a 56-4 record. His number 5 was retired by the school. So was his number 13 at Kansas. And today, the school issued a statement calling this truly a sad day for both the University of Kansas and for everyone in basketball. In 1998, Chamberlain returned to Lawrence and was honored by the people he felt he had let down in 1957 when the Jayhawks lost the NCAA final to North Carolina. He would later admit that that loss was the most bitter moment of his career.
It was a devastating thing for me because I felt as though I let the University of Kansas down and my teammates down.
After spending a season with the Harlem Globetrotters, Chamberlain arrived in the NBA in 1959 and forever changed the league. 4 times he was named the MVP, and in his rookie season averaged more than 37 points per game. But the early part of his career was defined by his legendary battles with Bill Russell and the Boston Celtics. Chamberlain won the individual battles. Russell won the championships. 8 times they clashed in the postseason. Only once did Chamberlain end up on the winning end.
This man was the hub of the greatest sports empire as far as winning and losing that I've ever seen, and he's the reason, along with member of the Celtics.
In 1968, Chamberlain was dealt to the Los Angeles Lakers and would call L.A. his home for the remainder of his life. The city of angels was the perfect place for a man who seemed to be designed by the gods. In 1972, Chamberlain won his second and final championship when the Lakers defeated the Knicks and the rival that defined the second half of his career, Willis Reed. Many will tell you that Wilt Chamberlain's ego was as large as the things he accomplished in his life. Maybe so, because Wilt was larger than anything that life had to offer. He changed basketball, he changed sports, he changed us.
Which sounds corny, but the NBA gave us all a chance to do that, so I feel it's my time to say thank you to the NBA.
Many of Chamberlain's records will never be duplicated. He won his first of 4 MVPs in his rookie season in 59 and 60, averaging 37.6 points per game. 3 seasons later, he averaged 48.5 minutes per game. A full game is 48 minutes, in case you've forgotten. He never once fouled out in his 14-year career. There have yet to be any funeral arrangements announced for Wilt Chamberlain, who died today at the age of 63.
For Kevin Frazier, I'm Jeannie Zelasco. This has been Primetime.
All right, girl.